Hello and welcome back to Rappahannock Issues. We're here with two very well-informed and very distinguished guests, Dr. Deirdre Condit from VCU, Dr. Stephen Farnsworth from the University of Mary Washington. We've been talking about polls and the problems that we have in making conclusions based on polls, but we want to shift to talking about the election over. Donald Trump is the president-elect, and really, we don't have any idea how he's going to govern, but it's going to be emerging. And you two are probably as well-versed or capable of speculating as anybody I can think of. Who would like to start talking first about what's going to happen next?
I like to consult my crystal ball on these kinds of things, and particularly in this case. For me, the remarkable thing about the Trump presidency as it begins to unfold is that he's a very different person walking into that office than people we've had experience with, certainly in the last 3 or 4 generations. Different than Nixon, different than Reagan. He in no way came up through any kind of governmental structure, right? So he has no experience literally with the institutions, how they work, what they do, why they're there. He's always flown over them. That's what wealth allows you to do. He sort of interacts through his attorneys historically, but he's not really had much experience in the process. And so I'm going to be interested to see what that means for him as he steps into the White House, which is at the heart of those institutions and those structures. I think you have to learn a kind of culture, and I don't know that he even begins to fathom what that culture is going to mean. And so for me, that's kind of one of the things I'm going to be watching.
Well, leads to what about his appointments? Is there any indication outside of some very interesting news reports of who he'll be reaching out to?
Well, I don't know what Stephen's run across today. I understand he's suggested Gingrich for Secretary of State, General Flynn for Secretary of Defense, Rudy Giuliani for Attorney General, and that's all I had heard before I had to zip out the door.
Yeah, I think the hardest part of the transition for Donald Trump is going to be appreciating the limitations of presidential power. When you're a CEO, you're basically a dictator. When you're a president, you have to negotiate with Congress, you have to negotiate with other foreign leaders. You can't just tell Angela Merkel, this is what we need from Germany this month. You know, that's just not how it's going to work for him. And that's going to be a real challenge because he never, even within his businesses, ever started at the bottom. He was the boss's son and then his successor as CEO. So I think that's going to be a major challenge. While the names that we just mentioned are the names that are being discussed, I think that Donald Trump would make a major mistake if he didn't go very deeply into Congress for many of his appointments. The challenge that every president has, even when you're talking about people in your own party, is reaching out to Capitol Hill and working with Capitol Hill. Presidents often, even when they have majority control, still struggle to get what they want through Congress. Right. And so it's important, I think, for Trump, who especially has no connection with Congress. He ran a campaign largely separate from other Republicans. Many Republicans quite deliberately ran their campaign separate from him. That's going to be a big challenge for Trump. And this is one of the reasons why I think those people who are quite worried about a Donald Trump presidency, the people who didn't vote for Donald Trump, should appreciate the limitations of presidential power. That is, that Congress is a ready and willing adversary on many, many policy issues. And the coordination across political branches is not all that smooth, even when we're talking about same party control of Congress and the White House.
There's another side to his presidency where he probably has a bit more control. Most presidents have a bit more control. That's foreign policy. And that has caused a lot of anxiety. It causes me a lot of anxiety. Do you care to comment on how that might evolve, what his foreign policy is?
Well, for me, I guess I completely agree with your analysis of the impact and ability to drag from Congress, except it may take him recognizing that, right? And so his appointments may not be drawn from Congress because he doesn't know that's what he should do. So I begin totally skeptical of that rational perspective. It depends on who he surrounds himself with, right? So he's got a set of sort of hidden advisors that have been kind of hanging through his campaign structure, but most of the people who are his kind of top layer are not in any way connected with government processes. And that's where I'm a little concerned, right?
And this is where Gingrich can be a great source of savvy advice about Congress.
Yes, exactly.
Because Gingrich understands this. But like you say, most of his advisors, they don't understand Congress at all. And that's going to be a significant barrier if he listens to the advice of people who don't understand the Hill. Because you won't get anywhere as president without the Hill. But turning to the foreign policy question that you asked about, I think that's one of those areas where we don't have a clear sense of what he's going to do. He has been very inconsistent on most of the things that he's talked about, other than very clear ideas about building a wall and restricting trade. Now, of course, building a wall, that's going to be a little tough to get through Congress. It's going to be expensive, and Republicans like to talk about balancing budgets rather than increasing the deficit. So I imagine there'll be a hardening of the wall or the barriers that are there now. I imagine there'll be money for additional patrols along the border, but that may be a promise he can't keep. With respect to foreign policy beyond the wall, I think we can see restrictions on trade as a scenario that may make some sense, maybe some tariffs deployed against China. But odds are that stuff won't fly with the WTO, and so Trump will probably get smacked down by some of these international organizations on non-trade tariff barriers and things like that. So I envision a really sort of a rocky first year for someone. I mean, presidency is on-the-job training that's pretty challenging, even for people who've already served in Congress, and Trump hasn't done that.
I feel like a doom and gloom person at the table. And you speak like a good political scientist, right? Like, this is what our discipline has taught us to understand. This is what our research has proven. And I just continue to not have a sense that we understand whether or not the office and the influence in the structure will contain this man, or whether he literally will simply say, I don't want to do it that way. And then we really don't know what kind of territory we're in. And the sort of global constraints then become the thing that has to hold him in. And I wish I had confidence that structure can form, but I have to stand back and be agnostic on this one. I'm not sure. I think the first year of Rocky is a potential understatement. I also think he has a tendency to get bored quickly, and it may be that he lets other people do his work, and so we don't have to have many of the concerns that we've had. He will not be as hands-on and involved.
I think there's a decent chance of that, because whenever the debate conversation turns to questions of policy, whether during the nomination stage or the general election stage, he had a few sentences to say about most topics, but they clearly didn't engage him. And so beyond a few sort of core issues like the wall and trade, maybe changing the Affordable Care Act, it didn't seem like too many issues really drew his attention. And so perhaps a CEO presidency might be a more within the lines of the law presidency than Donald Trump might naturally do on his own.
I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time, which was a real shame, because this has been absolutely fascinating. I think this has been one of our best programs, particularly given how recent the events are. And this show, filmed just before it's going to be shown on the air, so we're very excited about that. And I want to thank you both for being with us tonight and coming all the way from your work to join us and talk to us. That's my two guests. Watching Reverend.